I stood there beside the casket, clutching a crumpled handkerchief that still smelled faintly of his cologne, sandalwood and old pine, just like his favorite chair by the window. Everyone kept handing me tissues, whispering condolences that slid off me like water off glass. I nodded. I smiled. But I wasn't really there. My eyes kept drifting back to his hands, or rather, what was left of them. Daniel's wedding ring was gone. They'd folded his hands so gently over his chest, right over the lapel of his gray suit, the one I had pressed myself just 2 nights before. But the gold band I had slipped onto his finger 41 years ago? It wasn't there. It wasn't anywhere. I leaned closer, pretending to pray, to whisper something sweet and final. But really, I was checking again, and again. Still gone. After the service, when everyone had moved on to lukewarm coffee and soggy sponge cake at the reception hall, I pulled out my old flip phone, the one Daniel hated, but I never replaced. It buzzed in my purse, a vibration that felt more like a warning than a reminder. One unread message. It was from Daniel, sent the night before he died. If anything happens, check the envelope in the drawer. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I didn't know which drawer, or what he meant, or what I was supposed to forgive. But suddenly, the ring didn't feel like a mistake anymore. It felt like the beginning of something. A woman I barely knew handed me a plate of funeral food, some pale, trembling potato salad, and a dinner roll as dry as my mouth. I took it, smiled, and sat down near the corner of the room, away from the buzz of distant cousins and forced laughter. My knees ached. My heart did too. But something else had started to ache that I couldn't name just yet. I looked at his last text again, letting the words blur slightly from the tears in my eyes. My fingers brushed the edge of my purse where the handkerchief rested. I whispered to myself, "What did you do, Daniel?" And more importantly, who else knew? The first thing Maya did when I got home was take my coat off for me, like I was an invalid or a child. She guided me to the recliner, fluffed a pillow behind my back, and whispered, "You just sit, Mama. Let me take care of everything." I nodded because I didn't have the strength to argue. My throat was still raw from crying, and there was this hollowness behind my ribs that not even breath could reach. 15 minutes later, she appeared again, carrying a tray with a bowl of soup and 2 pale crackers. "I made it fresh, but I let it cool a little so you don't burn yourself," she said with a smile too tight to be real. But the soup was cold. Not lukewarm, cold. Chicken noodle, I think. But the fat had already formed a pale film over the top, and the smell wasn't comfort. It was obligation. I stirred it gently, watching the noodles shift like limp threads at the bottom. Maya hovered, watching me take a spoonful, her hands tightly clasped. Then she stepped back and said, "Caleb and I were just talking. We think it's best if you don't worry about the house right now. Just rest. We'll handle everything, Mama." I paused mid-bite. "What do you mean, handle everything?" "Oh, just groceries, bills, calls, and silly stuff." She waved it off like a fly. I heard their voices later in the kitchen, Caleb's low, gruff tone and Maya's insistent whisper. I couldn't catch all the words, but I caught enough. "She's not strong enough right now, just until things settle. Not yet. We have to go slow." Then footsteps, then silence. The next morning, I went to grab the mail and noticed my keyring felt lighter. One of the spares, gone. I asked Maya if she'd seen it. She smiled like it was nothing. "Oh, I took the extras, just for safekeeping. You don't need to worry about those little things right now." I stared at her for a moment, that cold soup still sitting untouched in the sink. Something about the way she said safekeeping made my spine stiffen. And for the first time since Daniel passed, I didn't feel safe in my own home. I hadn't touched Daniel's dresser since the day he left for the hospital. Something about it felt sacred, undisturbed. But that afternoon, while Maya was out and Caleb was in the garage pretending to fix the lawnmower he never touched, I opened the top drawer. His flannel shirts were still folded the way I used to fold them, sleeves tucked in, buttons fastened, edges lined like soldiers. The scent of his aftershave hit me like a memory I didn't ask for, bay rum, and tobacco. It pulled tears right out of my throat. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my hand drift across the top of the dresser. That's when I knocked over his old shaving kit. A few things spilled out: nail clippers, dull razors, and something heavier. A brass key. Not from our house, not from our mailbox, not from the garage or the safe. It had a little white tag tied to it. Just one letter written in Daniel's slanted handwriting. I stared at it for a long time. The metal was warm from my hand, and I had this sudden, overwhelming feeling that whatever it opened, I wasn't meant to find yet. But Daniel had hidden it, and Daniel had warned me. That night at dinner, I casually asked Caleb, "Did your father ever mention anything about a storage unit? Or something labeled B?" He didn't even pause between bites of lasagna. "Storage unit? No. Why?" I shrugged. "Found an old key. Thought it might be something." He reached for the pepper. "Probably nothing. He kept junk everywhere." But he wouldn't look me in the eye. Later that night, I sat in the dark with the brass key clutched in my hand, the ceiling fan spinning slow and steady above me, like a silent clock ticking down. A storm rolled in. Thunder rumbled so low it made the windows hum. I thought of Daniel's message again. Check the envelope. And now, this key. My hand tightened around it. If this house was no longer mine to control, maybe this key would lead me somewhere I still had power. I don't remember driving to the lawyer's office. I remember my shoes felt too tight, and I had to keep pulling at the neckline of my black blouse like it was choking me. Andre met me at the door with that same flat smile I'd seen at too many funerals. His office smelled of leather, lemon polish, and a faint trace of anxiety, the kind that clings to paper and secrets. "Come in, Evelyn," he said gently, gesturing toward the large oak table where Caleb and Maya were already seated. Caleb nodded. Maya didn't even look up from her phone. Andre cleared his throat and began. Most of it was what I expected: the small savings account, the pension arrangements, the car that barely ran anymore. But then came the part that made my stomach twist. To my beloved wife, Evelyn, I leave the right to reside in our home with all care and financial decisions to be overseen by my son, Caleb Price, and his wife, Maya Price, who will act in her best interest moving forward. Her best interest. Those 3 words rang out like a gavel in my skull. "And as for the rest of the estate," Andre continued, "I name Caleb and Maya as co-executors with full authority to manage assets, accounts, and end-of-life directives." It didn't sound like Daniel. It didn't sound like us. When it was over, Andre slid a manila envelope toward me with a practiced hand. "You can take this copy home," he said. "Everything is in order." I asked him quietly, "Did Daniel ever mention a sealed envelope? Something in a drawer?" Andre paused just a second too long. "Not that I recall. This is the only copy we have on file." But Daniel was meticulous. He kept backup copies of his backup copies. And he would have told me. He did tell me. As I walked out, Maya linked her arm through mine. "Don't worry, Mama. We'll take care of everything now. You just focus on healing." Healing. She said it like I was broken, so I sat in my car with the envelope on my lap, reading the bold print again and again. Last will and testament of Daniel E. Price. But not the whole truth. Not yet. It was folded neatly on my pillow, like a bedtime story. At first glance, I thought it was one of those charity catalogs Maya orders. Buy a goat for a village, or something cheerful and guilt-laced. But no, it was thick, glossy, and embossed with gold lettering. Briarwood Living. Comfort, care, community. I stared at it for a full minute before touching it. The smiling, elderly woman on the front looked far too chipper for someone whose entire life now fit into a single room and 3 daily meals. I flipped through it slowly, each page worse than the last. On-site memory specialists. Medication management. Family involvement encouraged. Family involvement. Like I was a problem to be handled gently, discreetly. I heard footsteps in the hall and quickly shoved the brochure between the mattress and headboard. Later that afternoon, I asked Caleb about it, casually, while he was tightening a bolt on a cabinet door that didn't need fixing. He didn't even flinch. "Oh, Maya's just looking into options, nothing serious, just thinking ahead, you know?" I forced a smile. "Thinking ahead to what, exactly?" He shrugged. "Just in case, Mom." I swallowed hard and left it at that. That evening, I noticed Maya had been in my study again. My notepad was moved, and the drawer with my old journals sat open. When I confronted her, she smiled too sweetly and said, "I was just tidying. You always used to write so much, remember?" I nodded, pretending to forget she never once asked me about my writing. Before bed, I called my doctor's office. After a little coaxing, the receptionist told me that Maya had requested a wellness assessment on my behalf, something about memory lapses and grief management. She's painting me as unstable. I sat on the edge of my bed with the brochure in my lap again, my fingers trembling as they traced the words peaceful transition. I don't remember deciding to rip it. I just remember the sound, paper tearing down the center like a scream finally escaping from behind my teeth. I stuffed the halves into the kitchen trash under old coffee grounds and banana peels. Let them come looking. I may be old, I may be grieving, but I am not disposable. Daniel never locked his office, not once. Not in all the years we lived here. Even when we fought, especially when we fought, he left that door open like a quiet invitation. A peace treaty in wood and brass. I used to leave his coffee just inside the frame on bad mornings, no words needed. But this morning, the knob didn't turn. I stood there in my robe, hair still wet from the shower, turning the handle like maybe I'd forgotten how it worked. Locked. I checked again. Still locked. I went back to the bedroom and fished out the brass key with the tag that read B. My palms were damp. It slid in easy but didn't turn. Wrong key. Wrong lock. I knocked once, like an idiot, then laughed at myself. Maya appeared behind me, holding a basket of folded laundry. "Oh, that room was a mess. Caleb locked it to sort through the papers. Don't worry, nothing important." I smiled tight. I thought maybe I could help. She blinked, then laughed. "You don't need that stress right now." That evening, after they'd left for groceries, I returned to the door. I got down on my knees that don't bend easy anymore, and looked under the gap. It was dark, but I could see shapes. The edge of Daniel's leather briefcase. A stack of ledgers with a red corner, torn years ago when he accidentally dropped one near the fireplace. I remember taping it up, scolding him like he was a schoolboy. That ledger used to live in our bedroom safe. The safe is empty now. Someone had moved it, unlocked the safe, removed the books, then changed the lock on the office. I sat there on the carpet, the brass key clutched in my fist, my breath shallow like I'd run a mile. Maya's voice echoed in my head. "Nothing important." That room held the second half of my marriage. Notes, passwords, old letters, and now it was sealed off. Not because I couldn't handle it. Because someone didn't want me to see. I looked down at the key, the one that didn't fit. If this isn't the door, what is? It started with a beige envelope marked urgent, in all caps, the kind you expect to be junk or insurance spam or some charity asking for more than prayers. But it was from the bank. Daniel's name was on the front, not mine. I opened it anyway. My hands shook the way they used to when I'd check his test results online during his last few months, like maybe I'd forgotten how to be brave. The letter was cold, formal, dry. Past due payment notice, second mortgage. Property, 168 Glenmore Lane. I read it twice, then 3 more times. We paid off the house 12 years ago, celebrated with a cheap bottle of wine and popcorn on the couch. Daniel hated debt. He used to say, "No one owns us, not the banks, not the bills, not the world." So why was there a second mortgage? I called the bank, sat through music that sounded like a lullaby played through a tin can. When I finally reached someone, they confirmed it. Loan issued 10 months ago. Primary borrower, Daniel E. Price. Co-signatory listed as... I held my breath. Caleb Price. There was a silence so loud I could hear my pulse in my ears. Later, I showed Caleb the letter. He barely glanced at it. "Oh, that. It was just some refinancing. Dad needed it for treatments. He didn't want to bother you." I looked at him hard. "He didn't even tell me." Caleb shrugged. "You were stressed enough." I wanted to scream, but all I said was, "You signed it too." Another shrug. "He asked me to help. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. I sat in the living room long after he walked away, the letter limp in my hand. The lights dimmed around me as the sun set. On the mantel was our wedding photo. Daniel in that ridiculous ruffled tuxedo, me in a dress 2 sizes too big. We looked like children playing dress-up. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. I wasn't just losing Daniel. I was starting to lose the life we built. One paper at a time. Mrs. Patel knocked on my door just after noon, holding a plate of ginger biscuits and 2 little tea bags wrapped in tissue. "You look like you could use something warm," she said, her eyes soft behind thick glasses. I hadn't spoken to her properly in weeks, not since the funeral. She was the kind of neighbor who never pried, but always knew more than she let on. We sat on my porch, steam rising from our chipped mugs. The wind carried the faint scent of cut grass and something sharp, like a storm that hadn't quite made up its mind. She cleared her throat gently. "I hope I'm not overstepping, Evelyn." I looked up. "You're not." "Well, a few weeks before Daniel passed, I was outside trimming the hedges. I heard voices, loud ones." I set my mug down too fast. It clinked hard against the saucer. She hesitated. "It was Caleb, I'm sure of it. He was angry. Yelling about, 'Just sign it, Dad, we don't have time.' I didn't hear your voice, so I assumed you weren't home." I gripped the mug again, my fingers suddenly cold despite the heat. She added, almost apologetically, "I didn't want to intrude, but it didn't sound right. Not like a normal family disagreement." The words, "just sign it," echoed in my chest like an alarm I'd ignored too long. Mrs. Patel looked at me carefully. I never saw Daniel look so pale the next day. He stood outside for almost an hour just staring at his mailbox. Didn't even wave when I called his name. I pressed my lips together. "Thank you for telling me." "I should have said something sooner," she whispered, almost to herself. "But you always seemed so strong." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Sometimes strength is just not knowing the truth yet. After she left, I stayed out there, watching the street as if it might offer some sort of answer. The sun dipped behind the trees, and my shadow stretched long and thin across the porch. I sipped the last of the tea. Lukewarm now. In that moment, I realized the silence around me wasn't peace. It was something else. It was warning. I kept it hidden behind the old sewing box, tucked in the back of the closet where no one ever looked, not even Daniel. A wide-mouthed mason jar with a rusted lid and a faded label that once said peach preserves. Inside was peace of mind, emergency cash. $2,000 in 20s and 10s rolled tight with rubber bands and wedged into the glass like secrets. I hadn't touched it in over a year, but that morning something told me to check. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that tight smile Maya gave me when I asked about grocery money. I closed the bedroom door behind me, knelt down slow, wincing at my knees, and pulled the box out. The jar was still there, but it was too light. I unscrewed the lid, heart thumping, counted once, then again, $960, almost half. Gone. Gone. At first I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I forgot spending it. But I hadn't. I remember every bill that left that jar, for Caleb's emergency dental work, for the plumber last winter, for the church roof repair. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was theft. I confronted Caleb after dinner, quietly. No accusations, just a question. "Did Daniel ever borrow from my jar?" He paused just long enough to answer me without answering. "Yeah, I think..." For the guy who fixed the lawnmower? Or maybe one of the prescriptions. Dad didn't want to bother you. I studied his face, the way he scratched behind his ear when he lied, something he's done since he was 12. I see, I said softly. That night, I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. Names, dates, missing things, locked doors, sealed drawers, that cold soup, that glossy brochure, that silent office. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being erased. I folded the paper and slid it under my mattress like a soldier hiding orders, not out of paranoia, out of practice. Because when people start gaslighting you, writing things down is how you keep yourself real. They think I'm fragile, but I've been quietly surviving things long before Maya ever called me Mama. I tried 4 storage facilities before I found the right one. The woman behind the desk at Creekside Self-Storage barely looked up when I handed her the brass key. Unit numbers on the tag? She asked. It wasn't. Just a single letter. B. She shrugged. There's a B row at the back. You'll know if it fits. The air back there smelled like concrete, mildew, and old promises. The key clicked on the 3rd lock I tried. Unit B03. It creaked open like a coffin lid. Dust motes floated in shafts of light from the cracked roof, swirling like secrets that had been waiting for air. Boxes, dozens of them, neatly stacked, most labeled in Daniel's handwriting. Banyan. Banyan taxes. Banyan, private. I didn't know what Banyan was. A company? A project? A code word? Some boxes were heavier than others. I opened one and found ledgers, rows of numbers, handwritten notes in margins, invoices I didn't understand. Another box had family photos, mostly of Caleb as a child, and old birthday cards I'd long forgotten existed. Then a folder caught my eye. Plain manila, labeled in all caps. Alternate trust. I didn't open it. Not yet. My hands were shaking too badly, and I needed time, real time, to absorb this. I sat on an overturned crate and looked around the unit. Everything here was placed with care, like Daniel had built a time capsule just for me. Or maybe just for himself, a world he couldn't share while he was alive. I thought about the key, how it had sat quietly under a shaving kit, waiting, how it didn't fit the office, how it led me here. Whatever Banyan was, it mattered, and Daniel wanted me to find it. I pulled the folder into my lap and let my hand rest on its cover. The cardboard was warm from the afternoon sun, but it felt heavier than paper should. Out in the distance, thunder rumbled. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The folder opened with a quiet crack, the kind of sound you don't hear unless you're listening with your whole body. Inside were 6 documents, clipped together with a rusted binder clip. The top one read, Alternate Trust Agreement, Banyan Holdings. Daniel's signature. Caleb's too, but not mine. I flipped through the pages, trying to make sense of them. Legal phrases tangled together like vines. Beneficiary control, asset shielding, non-disclosure clause. Then I saw the line that stopped my breath. Caregiver allocation, MP. MP, Maya Price. The payments started 2 years ago, long before Daniel's decline, monthly, consistent, increasing. I turned to a thick, handwritten ledger labeled Banyan Payments, MP. Each entry was dated, labeled, amounted. April, $800. May, $1,200. August, $1,800 plus discretionary bonus. Bonus for what? She'd been getting paid, well before Daniel ever needed help bathing or walking. Paid for what exactly? My hands trembled as I scanned more pages. Some referenced medical supply orders that never arrived. Others listed home modifications I'd never seen. This wasn't support, it was setup. One page was dog-eared. On the back, in Daniel's unmistakable cursive, do not let her take everything. Was he warning me? Or himself, I sat back on the crate and looked at the boxes stacked like tombstones around me. Banyan wasn't just a name. It was a root system, one that had spread beneath my life, quietly and deeply, until it touched everything, and I never saw it coming. Outside, the sky had turned slate gray. Wind kicked up dust along the corridor. I felt the sharp sting of betrayal, not just in my chest, but in my spine, my hands, the pit of my stomach. I clutched the folder to my chest and closed the unit behind me, sealing it with the same brass key that had unlocked this hidden world. As I walked to my car, the documents pressed close to my ribs. I whispered the truth I could no longer unsee. She was preparing long before I was grieving. And now, so am I. The phone was buried beneath scarves and receipts, and a single glove missing its pair. I hadn't touched it in days, maybe weeks. The same flip phone I'd stubbornly refused to upgrade. Daniel used to tease me about it. "That thing belongs in a museum," he'd laugh, but he always made sure it stayed charged. That afternoon, I turned it on, not to text, just to feel something familiar in my hand. One missed call, voicemail saved, timestamp 9:47 p.m., the night before he died. I hit play. At first, I only heard static. Then, his voice, thinner than I remembered, but still his. "Evelyn, it's me. I don't know how to say this. They want me to sign something. They're saying it's for the estate, to make things easier, but it doesn't feel right. I told Caleb no. I told him I needed more time." My heart stopped. I sat down on the edge of the bed, hand clutching the comforter. "I don't know who's behind it. I don't even know if they'll wait. If anything happens, Evelyn, don't trust the first version of anything." He paused. "I love you. I always have. I'm sorry I didn't say more." The line cut out. Just like that. I stared at the phone like it might collapse in my hand. His voice, frozen in time, filled every corner of the room. They pressured him, maybe not with fists, but with fear, with timing, with whispers and urgency, and a pen shoved into a trembling hand. I found an old USB recorder I used to use for choir practice and copied the voicemail onto it. The screen blinked once, then held. File saved. I wrapped it in a tissue and hid it in my jewelry box under the brooch Daniel gave me on our 25th anniversary. The one Maya once called quaint. She can take my keys. She can take my jar. But she will not take his voice. As I closed the lid, I whispered into the quiet bedroom, "I'm listening now, Daniel, and I won't stop." The attic creaked beneath my steps, each board groaning like an old man resisting change. I hadn't been up there in years, maybe not since the twins were small. The air smelled like dust and cedar and the corners of forgotten things. I found the garment bag behind a box labeled Xmas, lights not working. It was exactly where I left it, sealed, untouched, my wedding dress. I carried it down carefully, reverently, like it was alive. In the bedroom, I laid it across the bed and unzipped the bag slowly. The zipper catching once halfway down like it didn't want to show me what was inside. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then I saw the tear, clean, deliberate, a long, cruel slash down the center of the bodice, another across the lace sleeve, not time, not age, not moths, scissors, a knife, hands that knew what they were doing. I dropped to my knees beside it, my chest tight, vision swimming. I ran my fingers over the fabric, the tiny seed pearls now hanging loose, the ivory lace curled like wilting petals. Daniel would have never... No, he couldn't. But someone did. Was it Maya? Some silent message? Some final insult? Or Caleb? Would he even dare? I remembered our wedding day. Not the ceremony, but the moment before. I had a pimple on my chin, and the florist had delivered the wrong bouquet. I was shaking. Daniel cupped my face, smiled, and said, "Let's get married in our real skin, not perfection." And now the dress, our symbol, lay destroyed, defiled, not just the cloth, the story, the belief. I sat there for what felt like hours, the slashed fabric curled around my feet like a ghost of the girl I used to be. You don't cut a dress like that unless you want to be cruel. You don't slash lace unless you want someone to bleed without blood. I whispered into the silence, barely trusting my own voice. You don't slash cloth. You slash what it stood for. They want me broken, but they're going to learn. I'm made of more than thread. I laid both wills side by side on the kitchen table, the one from Andre's office, and the one I'd found buried in the banyan box. I smoothed them flat, turned on the desk lamp, and let the light fall evenly across both pages like a truth being summoned. They were nearly identical. Nearly. But on the second page of the official copy, I spotted something I hadn't noticed before. The notary stamp was wrong. Off-center, smudged, slightly tilted, like someone had done it in a hurry. Worse, the name beneath it, Ronald F. Jensen, wasn't familiar. Daniel had always used the same notary, Mrs. Lee. A woman with beautiful handwriting and an iron memory. She'd notarized our mortgage, our adoption papers, even our first car title. I still had her number scribbled in the back of an address book that hadn't been opened since the Obama administration. When I called, she answered on the second ring. Evelyn Price? Her voice cracked with warmth. It's been too long, dear. We exchanged soft greetings. Then I got to the point. Did you notarize Daniel's will? The new one? A pause. Then a firm no. Daniel always asked for me personally. He wouldn't go to anyone else. That's not like him. I hesitated. Would you mind looking at a copy? Later that afternoon, I met her at her home. Her living room smelled of tea and old wood polish. She adjusted her glasses, squinted at the signature. That's not his hand, she said gently. It looks like him, but it's copied, mechanical, not alive. My throat tightened. Do you think it was forged? I think someone used his name, but not his voice. Back home, I slid the 2 documents into a manila envelope and labeled it with thick black ink. Proof, do not touch. I tucked it beneath the lining of my sewing machine case. I wasn't just grieving a man anymore. I was preparing for a war. They faked his voice on paper. But now, I have his real one saved. The smell hit me before I saw her coming down the hall. Maya, cradling a tray with both hands, smiling that rehearsed smile. I made you soup again, Mama. Your favorite. Mushroom with a touch of nutmeg. It wasn't my favorite. Never had been. She set the tray on my lap like a nurse in a commercial. Beside the bowl sat a small white pill in a paper cup. Just something to help you rest, she said lightly. You've been so tense. I looked at her. What is it? Oh, just a mild relaxant. Caleb picked it up from the pharmacy. Totally safe. Doctor approved. She said it too quickly, too cleanly. I smiled and nodded, lifting the spoon with slow hands. The soup was warm this time, but gritty. A chalky aftertaste clung to the back of my throat after the first sip. I glanced at the pill again. Small, white, unlabeled. I lifted it to my lips, tilting my head back, then tucked it into my cheek like a child hiding peas at the dinner table. Maya watched me swallow the water. Good girl, she said softly. I chewed my soup slowly while she chatted. About grocery sales, her cousin's new baby, the leak in the guest bathroom. None of it real. None of it mattered. When she left, I went to the bathroom, spit the pill into a tissue, and flushed it down the toilet. Then I poured the rest of the soup down the sink, watching it spiral away with the foam and lies. I cleaned the bowl spotless, placed it gently in the drying rack like nothing had happened. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and wrote, Soup, pill. Watched me swallow. They were testing boundaries now, not just locking doors, not just stealing jars, controlling what I ate, what I felt, what I remembered. But I'm done pretending. Let them think I'm calm. Let them think I'm slow. I've played the silent widow, the tired mother, the forgetful old woman. But I'm wide awake, and I'm writing everything down. Andre's office felt colder this time. Maybe it was the air conditioner, or maybe it was the shift in how I saw him. The walls were lined with framed diplomas and oil paintings of landscapes that didn't belong to anyone. Everything in the room felt neutral, sanitized, safe. "I just wanted to ask one thing," I said, folding my hands neatly on the table. "Before Daniel passed, did he ever mention updating the will?" Andre blinked, too slowly. "Why do you ask?" I shrugged. "Just curious. He always said we'd revise things as life changed. Illness tends to change things, doesn't it?" He looked down at his desk, then sighed. "He mentioned something, a codicil, but he never signed it, so legally it didn't go anywhere." My heart picked up. "Did you draft it?" "Yes." "Do you still have it?" He hesitated again. "Technically, yes. We keep backups of all drafts. But Evelyn, it wasn't valid." "He never filed it." "I'd still like to see it." He left the room. When he returned, he held a folder thinner than I expected. Inside, one typed page with Daniel's name at the top. The changes were simple, but seismic. Executor, Evelyn Price. Power of attorney, Evelyn Price. All real property and financial oversight removed from Caleb Price and Maya Price. I read it twice, lips pressed into a tight line. "He was going to protect me," I whispered. Andre rubbed the back of his neck. He called me 3 days before he went into the hospital, said he was having second thoughts about the original terms. Said he'd bring the signed version by in person. But he didn't. "No, and I didn't want to add to your grief. I didn't think you'd want to know, given everything." I looked him dead in the eye. "That's the problem. Everyone keeps deciding what I need to know." I asked for a printed copy. He hesitated, then made one. As I left the office, folder tucked under my arm, the wind picked up. Cool, sharp, alive. Daniel tried. And now I would finish what he couldn't. Luis showed up just before sunset, wearing that same faded windbreaker he's had since the 90s and carrying something small in his hand. He stood awkwardly on my porch, like a man rehearsing something he didn't want to say. "I should have come sooner," he said, eyes on the floorboards. I stepped aside to let him in. "You always come when it matters." We sat at the kitchen table. I poured 2 cups of tea, though neither of us touched them. He placed the envelope between us. Small, yellowed, tied with a thin red string. "Daniel gave this to me," he said, "months ago. Told me to keep it safe. Said I'd know when to give it to you." I stared at it. "And now feels like the right time?" Luis nodded. "I've been hearing things, and something's not sitting right." I untied the string with careful fingers. Inside was a folded letter, handwritten. The ink was smudged in places, and the writing slanted like he was racing time. "Ev. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I didn't trust myself to say this out loud. Caleb's been pushing, too hard. Maya too. I signed things I shouldn't have. I thought I had time to fix it. I was wrong. Don't let them freeze you out. You were always the strong one. You deserve better than silence. If Evelyn ever reads this, tell her I tried. Love always. Daniel." My hands trembled. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. He did try. Luis shifted in his seat. I didn't want to believe it. But after the will, the way Caleb talks to you now, I opened my eyes. You did the right thing, even if it's late. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. I placed the letter back in the envelope, retied the string, and tucked it into my notebook under the page labeled Sequence of Lies. Daniel's voice, Daniel's words, finally reaching me from the space between guilt and goodbye. I'd carry them now, and I'd make sure they were heard. I didn't even get a call from Caleb, just a letter, hand-delivered by a courier with a plastic smile. Notice of emergency hearing. Petition for temporary conservatorship. They were trying to take everything, legally, publicly, quickly. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Pale blue walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and benches that punished your spine. I wore my navy coat and the brooch Daniel gave me on our 25th. Maya once called it vintage. I called it armor. Caleb sat at the far table with his lawyer, slick, young, and too clean. Maya dabbed her eyes with a tissue before we even sat down. A performance. Their argument was simple. I was grieving, unstable, and in need of protection for my own good. They cited the lost keys, the soup, the confusion about bank letters. They painted a picture of a woman too fragile to manage anything. I said very little. Just this. I buried my husband 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've been fed pills I didn't request, locked out of my own office, and denied access to my finances. If grief is evidence of weakness, then every widow in this city is unfit to hold her own name. The judge raised an eyebrow. That was enough. After 45 minutes, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. There's reason to examine both sides further. Temporary oversight granted to Mr. Caleb Price, on financial matters only. Full hearing scheduled in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. That's all I had. Outside, the sky was gray, like it couldn't decide whether to storm or stall. Maya offered me a smile as we crossed paths in the hallway. You'll feel so much better soon, Mama. This is for the best. I didn't answer. I went home, poured myself a glass of water, and opened the folder labeled Witness Names, TBD. I added 2, Luis and Mrs. Patel. They think courtrooms scare me? Try 30 years of PTA meetings with broken air conditioning and passive-aggressive coffee moms. Try surviving childbirth. Try holding a man's hand while he forgets your name. They think I'll stay quiet. Let them. If they want to play legal, then I'll play louder. She showed up on a Thursday morning, clutching her purse like it held dynamite. Nora, small, soft-spoken, barely 26. She used to come by twice a week to help Daniel bathe, organize his meds, read him news headlines he pretended to hate. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. She stood at my door, shifting from foot to foot. Do you have a minute, Mrs. Price? I nodded. Come in. We sat in the living room. I offered her tea. She declined. Her hands wouldn't stop moving. I've been meaning to come sooner. I heard about the conservatorship hearing from someone at church. I waited. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small binder, the kind kids use in school, blue plastic, edges frayed. She placed it gently on the table between us. This was my schedule log, for when I worked here. I was supposed to write everything I did, what Daniel ate, what time he took his meds, how he slept. She looked at me, eyes full of guilt. But Maya told me to change entries or erase them, especially when you asked about phone calls or mail. She told me not to leave the house if you were in the room. Said you were fragile, confused. I said nothing, just opened the binder. Red ink, black ink, then corrections in blue, sections blacked out with Sharpie. Notes like, Mrs. Price asked about voicemail, diverted, and shredded hospice envelope before dinner. Nora whispered, I kept a backup. I knew it wasn't right, but I needed the job. I'm sorry. I closed the binder softly. My heart was a steady thud in my chest. You were young, scared. I understand. Her eyes welled. She made it sound like you wouldn't notice, like you were already slipping. I reached out, placed a hand over hers. But I did notice. She gave a small nod, then slid a signed statement across the table, her own words, dated and detailed. I don't want to be afraid of her anymore, she whispered. I think she thought you'd never fight back. I folded the paper and tucked it into my notebook. Then she never knew who she was dealing with. She left quietly. But the truth she brought stayed loud. The house was dark, but I didn't need the lights. I knew every creak of the floorboards, every edge of the banister, every lazy step that threatened to betray you if you weren't careful. Maya and Caleb were out. Date night, she said, her voice sugar slick. I waited 30 minutes after the car pulled out of the driveway. Then I went straight to Daniel's office. I didn't try the lock. I'd picked it earlier that morning with a bobby pin and a prayer. Inside, the air was stale and quiet. I moved quickly, like muscle memory guided my hands. bottom desk drawer, flip it over, just like he used to do when hiding anniversary gifts. And there it was, a scrap of yellow paper, faded ink, 6 numbers in Daniel's precise handwriting. I looked around the room, then pulled back the rug beneath the desk. The fake storage crate wasn't fake after all. It had a hidden base. Underneath, a black floor safe, small, heavy, unassuming. I entered the combination. The lock clicked open like a breath finally exhaled. Inside was a stack of documents in a sealed envelope marked Private, EP Only. And beneath it, a flash drive labeled Banyan Final. I opened the envelope slowly, careful not to rip. The codicil, signed, stamped, notarized by Mrs. Lee. No smudges, no copies, no lies. Daniel's signature, his real one, was bold and clear, dated 2 days before his hospitalization. It named me as sole executor, removed Caleb and Maya entirely, designated the Banyan account as protected, and assigned all final financial rights to me. I held the paper against my chest, heart pounding hard enough to feel in my teeth. He did it. He finished what he started. He just hid it too well. Until now. I placed the documents into a fresh manila folder, tucked the flash drive into my coat pocket, and closed the safe. Then I locked the office door behind me, not because I was afraid, but because the truth needed protecting. As I stepped into the hallway, I whispered, "You hid it well, Daniel." My fingers tightened around the folder. But I found it. It was wedged between the passenger seat and the console, folded in half, crinkled at the edges. I'd only climbed into Caleb's car to grab my knitting bag. He claimed he took it by accident after church. But the paper caught my eye. The familiar off-white color of a pawn shop slip. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. Item, men's gold ring, engraved E and D. Date, funeral day, 9:17 a.m. Amount paid, $180. My breath caught. He pawned Daniel's wedding ring, the one that vanished from his hand before the casket closed, the one I placed there 41 years ago, with a whisper and shaking hands and love that I thought could weather anything. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove. The pawn shop was 2 miles away. Dingy windows, flickering neon sign that read, "Open," like a dare. Inside, a man in a denim vest looked up lazily. "Can I help you?" I handed him the receipt. He blinked. "Yeah, I remember that one. Pretty piece." He disappeared into the back and returned with a small velvet pouch. I opened it and time stopped. The ring was warm from his hand. My ring. Daniel's ring. Our ring. The engraving was still there. E and D, etched with the gentleness of 2 people who hadn't yet lived through cancer or quiet betrayals or soup spiked with silence. I paid for it without a word. Full price, no bargaining. As I slipped it onto my thumb, the man said casually, "Guy who sold it didn't seem too sad. Said it was for arrangements, but, didn't act like someone grieving." I nodded once, then turned and left. In the car, I stared at the ring resting on my hand. It felt too heavy for gold. He pawned it like it was trash, like it wasn't sacred. But I knew better. Back at home, I placed it gently on Daniel's photo. Let it rest there a moment. Let it remember. Then I slipped it back onto my finger. Wrong hand, wrong finger, but right where it belonged now. "You made a vow, Daniel," I whispered. "I'll keep it for both of us now." I invited them to Andre's office under the pretense of reviewing estate adjustments. Maya showed up in pearls and false calm. Caleb looked bored, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Andre sat between them, fidgeting with his pen. I arrived last, a canvas tote in one hand, Daniel's reading glasses in the other. "I brought some papers," I said. "Hope that's all right." They nodded politely. I pulled out the original codicil, signed, notarized, clear, laid it on the table like a queen placing her winning card. Maya leaned forward. "What is this?" "The real will," I said softly. Andre paled. "Where did you find this?" "In a safe. one that wasn't meant for your version of the story. I followed with the notarized confirmation from Mrs. Lee, Nora's signed statement, the pawn receipt, and finally, Daniel's handwritten letter, still folded, the creases trembling like my hands once did. Maya chuckled, a hollow, sharp sound. "You've really been busy, Mama." Caleb's face turned a color I hadn't seen since he broke his arm at age 8 and tried to lie about it. "I also have Daniel's voicemail," I added, tapping the recorder in my bag. "The one where he says he was being pressured. The one where he told me not to trust the first version of anything." No one laughed then. Maya's fingers tightened around her purse strap. Caleb opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to let you know. This is what I'll be bringing to court." Silence. The kind that makes clocks louder. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there, Daniel's glasses resting beside the folder. His absence filled the room like thunder behind closed windows. Maya stood first. "Let's go," she snapped. Caleb lingered, staring at the codicil like it might catch fire. As they left, Andre gave me a look that was half apology, half respect. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. I gathered the papers, placed Daniel's glasses gently back in their case, and stood. He tried to warn me. Now it was my turn to be heard, and I would not be whispered away. I made chicken soup from scratch, the way Daniel liked it. Extra carrots, wide noodles, a bay leaf floating like a boat in memory. By noon, the house was full. Not loud, but warm. People from the church choir, Mrs. Patel with her embroidered scarf, Luis, carrying lemon bars wrapped in foil. Even Nora, nervous but brave, walked in with her head held high. Maya and Caleb weren't invited. I called it a thank you lunch, but it was something more. The dining table, long and worn, had seen years of birthday candles and coffee spills. Today, it held bowls of truth. I served with a smile, but my heart was doing something else entirely, gathering strength. Nora spoke first, quietly, to Mrs. Patel and 2 others. I was told to hide her calls to change the logs, and I didn't know how wrong it was until I saw her cry over cold soup. Mrs. Patel nodded. I heard yelling. From the garden. It wasn't Evelyn's voice. It was angry. Young. Luis cleared his throat. "Daniel gave me this." He held up the envelope, yellowed now, the string still intact. "It's his handwriting. Says he didn't want Caleb or Maya controlling anything. Says he trusted Evelyn. Fully." The room grew still. No one gasped. No one shouted. But something shifted. The silence wasn't fear. It was belief settling in. I looked around, faces I'd known for years. Some had brought casseroles when Daniel was sick. Some had prayed for me when I couldn't even fold my hands. They had seen me as a wife, as a widow. Now they saw me as a witness. I ladled more soup. My arm ached, but I kept going. Because this was power. Not the kind that comes from courts and signatures, but the kind that comes when someone says, "I believe you," with their eyes. "I don't need to shout," I said softly, not to anyone in particular. "I just need to be seen." And I was. Fully. Finally. Not as fragile. Not as faded. But as a woman still standing, soup in hand, ready to finish what love started. I wore Daniel's favorite brooch. Navy dress. No makeup. Just strength. Courtrooms don't care if you're tired. They care if you're ready. Caleb's lawyer started first. Calm, clipped, condescending. "She's grieving. She's confused. We acted to protect her. No malice involved." Then it was my turn. I didn't speak fast. I didn't shake. I just unzipped my folder and placed Daniel's signed codicil on the stand. Original, dated, notarized by Mrs. Lee. The judge leaned in. Next, Nora took the stand. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. I was told to isolate her, to hide mail, to erase records. She held up the binder. Mrs. Patel followed, quietly confirmed what she'd heard, what she'd seen. Then Luis stepped forward. He unfolded Daniel's letter, creased, faded, alive. "Tell her I tried." Andre, seated in the back, stood on his own. "I confirm that this document was discussed. The handwriting is Mr. Price's. The intent was clear." The judge sat still, pen in hand, comparing signatures side by side. He tapped the forged will once, then the real one. His voice was even. "I'll be reviewing all submitted materials." He paused. "For now, all assets are frozen, and authority over the estate is temporarily restored to Mrs. Evelyn Price until further ruling." I exhaled for the first time in weeks. Maya didn't blink. Caleb looked down. I didn't look at either of them. The pen remained in the judge's hand, hovering, not yet finished, but the truth had stepped into the light, and it was standing on solid ground. The judgment came in a manila envelope. No drama, no courtroom gasp, just paper, black ink, and a simple declaration. The codicil stands. Daniel's final wishes were upheld. Caleb and Maya were removed as executors. The estate was returned to me, fully and legally. An inquiry was opened into the falsified notary stamp. But I didn't care about consequences. I cared about closure. They didn't come back to the house. They didn't call. No apology, just silence. Fine. The locks were changed within 24 hours. I kept Daniel's old key, though, hung it on a hook beside his reading glasses. A quiet reminder of the man who tried, in the end, to protect what we built. I found a new jar, a clear one, wide-lipped, and labeled it in marker. Grace. Not just money, but strength saved. The long table in my dining room is set every Sunday now. Anyone who knocks gets soup. Nora helps me serve. Mrs. Patel brings tea. Luis plays music on his ancient stereo. No more secrets here. Only warmth. Only choice. I wear Daniel's ring again. Not for what it meant, but for what it still means. Resilience. Memory. Truth. As the sun dipped behind the magnolia tree out front, I stepped onto the porch, turned the key in the new lock, and felt something settle inside me. This house doesn't belong to grief anymore. It doesn't belong to silence. It belongs to no one but me now, and anyone I choose to let in.